Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com. And I am gradually coming to the conclusion that I really need to come up with or need to produce some sort of better video intro. It's true, Joe Rogan is too short for this ride. Hope the rest of you are up to it. So I got an email today from someone who was paying attention. He's French. He's paying attention to the Yellow Vest protests. I strongly suspect he's actively involved with them, actually. And he sent me a really interesting email about something that came out on Twitter. The leader of the new controlled opposition, Red Scarves, was interviewed. And it was interesting. I'm not going to play the clip because it's all in French. But to summarize, he loses control of his smugness and spills the beans. It's a call for the cops to be more violent and for the EU to assert its authority over the people of France. Now, that is exactly the opposite of what the genuine Yellow Vests intend. It's the exact opposite of what they want. One of the main things that they want is to get rid of Macron. You know, they have, you see the signs, démission Macron. That means, resign Macron, essentially. And so this isn't the first attempt that they've made to control and direct the opposition. They've already done it. They tried to establish rival Yellow Vests, and now what they're trying to do is they are trying to come up with a new group, this Red Scarves group, that will capture all of the media attention. What you're going to see is that you're going to see more and more of the media talking to the Red Scarves, trying to elevate them to the position of leadership in order to defang all of the momentum of the movement. And that's exactly what you saw with the Tea Party. I don't know if you're aware, but everyone was claiming that they were involved with the Tea Party. I was really interested to see at the time how, like, even Joe Farah of WorldNet Daily was, saying, well, we're Tea Party. And so the whole thing is a standard operating procedure. And the reason that I'm pointing this out to you is so that you can see how it's actually used with you. It was used with the alt-right. What did they do when the alt-right began to become popular? They immediately started elevating people like Richard Spencer. They started talking to people who are absolutely not only not dangerous to the narrative, they try to bring in opposition that fits the narrative. And yeah, they do have Antifa in France. They absolutely do have Antifa in France. And so, and what you'll find out is eventually is that a number of the important Red Scarf leaders are going to turn out to be Antifa because they fit the role of the controlled opposition. Kenny Fofo is the first super chat of the evening. He says, Vox, do you think the CFR deep state will take out President Trump and put Pelosi into the White House desert bear? No, I don't. I think that that is far, far too risky. I think they were in a much better time. They were in a much better place to do that earlier. One thing a lot of people don't realize, I know a lot of people think that Q is a fake or it's a LARP or something. But he's actually provided a fairly decent perspective on better understanding the events that we're seeing. And what we're seeing now is all the media layoffs. We're seeing all this stuff coming out about the social media companies. These things are connected to the way that Trump has been systematically defunding the various deep state ops. And so they are not in anywhere nearly the position to do the kind of things that we know that they have, or that we suspect that they've done in the past. The dashing rogue. I still haven't edited your video, dude, but we weren't going to talk about it today anyhow. But hopefully I'll get that done soon because it's awesome. The dashing rogue says, when you talk about the yellow vests, you must understand that it's an international movement. Exactly. Keep in mind what started all this was Macron's fuel tax. Who loses with the fuel tax? Who wins the oil pipelines? But that's where it started, but that's not where it's ended. You know, it's gone well beyond the fuel tax now because people are waking up to the fact that the governments of the neoliberal world order are put in place to rule them as satrapies for the order itself. And whoever, you know, the banks or the reptilians or the aliens or whoever else is supposedly, you know, at the level beyond that, you know, the people in France know that their politicians do not speak for the nation. The people in Britain know that all the politicians trying to sabotage Brexit are not doing so in the interests of the British people. Everybody understands this now. You know. So that's a good point, Dashing Rogue. Cave Bear Chris says, hi, Vox. Hey, Cave Bear. Got a good merch idea for you. Slam-a-gamma t-shirts. Maybe put the smashed Greek letter below. I will talk to Crypto Fashions. We will do that. And send me your, email me your physical address, and I will make sure that we get one sent to you. I'm not sure that slam-a-gamma is quite harsh enough, but it does rhyme, so it's got that going for it. Maybe if we have like a hammer. Anyhow, we'll let the artist figure that sort of thing out. Let's see. Hey, don't be insulting red wine. When you insult red wine, when you insult men who drink red wine, I take that personally. And somebody said, just like Occupy Wall Street. That's exactly right. You need to understand that setting up controlled opposition is something that has been done for centuries. And so that's why, you know, there's an old saying about the old, I don't know if it was like the old militia groups or the Ku Klux Klan or whatever, but they used to say that that by the 1980s, the average Klan meeting was one actual Klan member and 13 federal agents. And so, there's an amazing amount of fraud, an amazing amount of play acting and LARPing that's involved. And it's always a level of controlled opposition. There's a difference between controlled opposition and authorized opposition. You know, I don't think that Jordan Peterson or people like the commentator. I don't know about Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has always been, he's been controlled opposition since he was a little kid. So, but for other people, they're just in the right place at the right time, and they're useful in the right place at the right time. Dylan S. says, trying to leave California permanently, any ideas? Where are you from originally? Where's your family from originally? That's where I would look at. I mean, are you one of the rare native Californians? Let's see. Matthew Weber said, I really enjoyed your analysis of Toe Rogan's fighting style. What type of fighting style and gym would you recommend for a noob like me? You want to go and visit a lot of gyms and dojos. And once you go and visit all of them, then you will soon see the differences. The first couple times you won't really understand what you're seeing, but the differences between the various training programs, the difference between the capabilities of the fighters, it'll become very clear to you very rapidly. I mean, we knew nothing at all when we first started looking at all the different dojos. And like I said, I think we went to something like 23 different dojos. The last one that we went to, we were like, this is clearly it. By that time, our eye was educated enough that we could see that these guys were, really knew what they were doing. And so, just visit a lot of dojos and trust what you see. Jay Stang recommends Muay Thai. I always had the most trouble with the serious Muay Thai folks compared to all the other styles that we would encounter. Wait, what's the wrong with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? You mean Brazilian cuddling? Watch the video. I did a video on Brazilian cuddling, and I mean it's actually in some cases it's very useful. It's very good, but it's not great for actual fighting in the real world. You don't want to go to ground. Let's see. Does anyone think Nick Fuentes is eerily similar to Ben Shapiro? I don't know enough about Nick to know that. So, but I don't really, he doesn't strike me as being the same level of, here is your boy genius who will spit out Republican talking points. I mean, all Shapiro has ever done his entire life is spit out Republican talking points. That's what he does. William Marone says, how about banning dual citizenship in the House and Senate? Well, dual citizenship should be banned everywhere. It's ridiculous. And many countries still do ban it. Some that permit it are already discussing getting rid of it. Dual citizenship, no man can serve two masters, and no man can truly be the citizen of two different nations, two different countries. That was the first thing I thought too. I love all the Trump should recognize Le Pen as the rightful leader of France. No question. I would absolutely love to see the God Emperor do that. How many, let's see, how many immigrants are coming into Italy under Salvini? I have no idea, but a lot less than before. So, let's see. Let's check and see how we're doing over here on how the guys on Stream.me are doing. And Gamma Grinder, Gamma Ray Gun. Like JP and the Littlest Chicken Hawk? Exactly. Oh, that's right. Box Cutter Bear reminds me. It's the Brazilian Cuddle Puddle. So the the guys at Stream.me are in form. No question. Let's see. When will American whites stop voting 40% Democrat? Good question. I don't know, but I think it's going to continue drifting slowly to the Republican Party. Macro Lens, did you renounce your U.S. citizenship for tax purposes? Yeah. I'm well known for not answering personal questions, and you think that I'm going to answer a question like that? That seems likely. Is Christianity culpable for the fall of the West? Absolutely not, except in that Christians failed in their Christian duty, and that is one reason why the West is where it is. Christianity is one of the three pillars of the West. It can't be a reason for the fall of the West. I mean, what we're seeing now is something that we're seeing as nations are getting rid of their state churches, where fewer and fewer people are Christians. So that makes no sense whatsoever. Hey Vox, what's your social security number? Yeah, that's another one. That's classified. So anyhow, the problem is that we're still in a period of relatively high social mood, despite all of the cultural rifts, despite all of the obvious problems. The social mood is still pretty high. The stock market's still high. The economy's still doing reasonably well. So you're not going to see whites in America banding together until they actually start feeling both endangered as well as under financial stress. See, this is wrong. Christianity doesn't work in a globalist system. It brought together the European nation, and now it brings together African men and European women. No, it doesn't. That's totally ridiculous. The people who are pushing that stuff are not Christians. And Christianity is outside the world system. When, for example, they say, well, but it says there's neither Greek nor Jew in Christianity. That's true. It also says there's neither male nor female, because we're talking about something that is in the world, but not of it. So the family of Christianity is orthogonal to the nations. It's not a substitute for the nations. Christianity does not bring the nations together. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It is the prince of this world, the primordial evil, Satan, the accuser, the devil, who brings the nations together under the Tower of Babel. That's why the European Union uses the Tower of Babel as one of its symbols. Zoe Bear says, I'm optimistic about the future. Streams like yours are actively being sought out. The MSM makes the opposition seem like they have the numbers, but I don't believe the hype. Oh, I said it wrong. Thanks from Zowie, like Wowie, because everyone calls me Zoe. Fair enough. My apologies. Zowie Bear. Also very generous. Thank you. I'm not overall pessimistic. I'm pessimistic about various political entities staying together. I don't believe that the European Union is going to last. I don't believe that the United States of America is going to last. But the Earth is not going to disappear. The map is going to change, but the territory will remain. Hopefully the people will remain. And so it's important not to get too caught up in the idea that things have to be the way that they are. Born Again Bear asks, what should a person do to be a proper Christian? Well, given your name, I would suspect that you know, but my answer would be that you must believe with your heart and confess with your tongue that Jesus Christ is Lord. You also need to repent of your sins, and you need to do your best to walk the hard and narrow path. Do your best to follow the way that Jesus taught us in the New Testament. So, it's simple, but it's not easy. Yeah, I mean, Jesus said, first lesson is love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. And the second thing is to love your neighbor as yourself. That's also a useful starting place. Lauren Swain says, if there isn't a hierarchy for women, is there anything similar? I'm not a woman, so I don't pretend to know or understand it. And but what I would say is that it's not just looks. Looks are a very important part of it, but there's also an element of social status, which tends to revolve around the father or the husband. LNJ Nomad says, I feel we will save Western civilization. I hope so too. God will help up Vox. By the way, the Papa Bear turned me onto your channel. Well, thank you, Papa Bear, and thank you, LNJ Nomads. The thing is that somebody else said praying does nothing. You're wrong. It absolutely does, even if you don't believe in God. It changes you. The mere act of asking for divine intercession does something to you. Now, it doesn't always, it's not magic. It's not, Aslan is not a tame lion. God is not some sort of wishing well. But there is absolutely no question whatsoever that prayer does change you. It does change the world around you. Not always immediately, but it does change it. Pierre Truk says, sorry, Vox, I wasn't home, couldn't send the transcript on time. I did a quick hack job of it. It's in your email in case you need it. Well, let's read it then. All right, here we go. So this is the translation from the so-called leader of the Red Scarves. Now, keep in mind, the Red Scarves are supposed to be connected to they're supposed to be a offshoot of the Yellow Vests. He actually has it listed as smug dickhead, but I'm gonna just for reference just say the Red Scarf says, France has let itself go for too long. We must reframe everything at a supranational level. Europe can force nations to do things they are not ready to do for fear of their people. Simply as that, Europe must impose its will on the nations. He says he's the organizer of the Red Scarves and says, we must show these seditious people that they are not the will of the people. They should go back to work if they even have a job. Looks smug. He says, we are the people. Their will, the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vests, will be constrained by force if necessary. He seems certain of this. In the end, the state will win, Macron will win, EU will win. The Russian Today reporter says, do you back Macron 100% against the Gilets jaunes? The Red Scarf says, Macron let the fire spread, should have been much firmer. 2 months passed, repression was not enough. The Russia Today reporter says, Gilets jaunes leader Rodriguez lost an eye. Look at Venezuela, 27 dead in one day. France is way too gentle, not firm enough. Yeah, we need a firmer, stricter police power to help calm down this crowd. It says he uses a derogatory expression. So that is not a legitimate opposition leader. That is absolutely controlled opposition, pro-government, pro-EU, pro-violent force against the people. That is exactly the voice of Antifa. That is the voice of the low-level neoliberal world order. And so Um, people need to understand that. People need to realize that not everybody who pops up as some sort of opposition leader is genuine opposition. The Jeremy Anglesey has read his 4GW. He says, I don't know, if they took his advice, it would probably end up worse for the government. There's no question. There's absolutely no question. And that's why the situation with the Gilets jaunes is full of the potential for another French Revolution. And that is why Macron and the EU leaders are so terrified. In fact, it's probably one reason why Brexit is going to go through without more than nominal opposition from the EU, because they don't need the additional trouble. They're going to have trouble, forget Britain, they're going to have trouble keeping Italy in the EU. They're going to have trouble keeping France in the EU, because people understand that this whole program is about imperialism. This whole program is about establishing and maintaining a Fourth Reich. Hey, Vox, how will people know that we are disciples of Christ? Well, they seem to figure out pretty quickly. If need be, they'll tell you that you need to make an offering to an idol just to get you to refuse. France could have a revolution, but only if it takes less than 30 hours per week. Brock Sampson says, non-mainstream scientists are coming to the conclusion that the Earth has a catastrophic cycle as referenced in the Bible. Well, I've actually read a number of things on catastrophe. Who's that? It starts with a V. I want to say Veblen, but he's the economist. It's not Veblen. Velinsky, I think. I've never actually read Velinsky's work, but I read the work of James Hogan writing about it. And I don't believe in it, but it is an interesting concept. This is a good question. Can Macron even resign if he wanted to, or would there be consequences from his masters? I think that, in fact, they probably will encourage him to resign soon. He's clearly not capable of keeping the situation under control. So, what they're trying to do with the controlled opposition is they're trying to create some other party that is capable of fulfilling that role. That's what Macron was. They parachuted him in order to stop Le Pen. But now that's turned out to be a complete catastrophe for them. Let's see. Enjoyed Voxiversity, Why the West Needs Christianity. You noted that artists used to elevate the beautiful, good, and true. What is your view on well-made art that elevates the ugly, the bad, and the false? I think that is proof that evil can make use of talent. Talent can be corrupted. It can be bought. There's plenty of talent in the service of evil. Look at how much talent is involved in the advertising industry, in the movie industry, and look at the pure evil that they just pump out relentlessly. So, Duralex said Lex says Q was right, just not harsh enough. These window lickers are so dumb they stick their gum to the top of the desk. He's referring to the common Q phrase, these people are stupid. Well, I think that over time they've gotten lazy. It's gotten too easy for them. We're on what? The third and fourth generation in some cases. And, do you really think that Alex Soros is anywhere remotely as capable as George? Have any of the Rockefellers proved to be as effective as David Rockefeller, much less John D. Rockefeller? Not even a little bit. Wealth and privilege has a tendency to enervate and to weaken people. And these are not people who have a sense of noblesse oblige, like the old aristocrats who were a warrior class. And so it's very, very easy for them to just, dive into hedonism and into, pursuits that further weaken and distract them. Yeah. Ben Darling says their muscles have atrophied through lack of use. I think that's true. And so, and a lot of us have begun to realize that, we can't just sit around engaging in whatever feels good. We can't just sit around not accomplishing anything, just looking for ways to give ourselves a dopamine rush. A lot of you are here because you like the fact that I am encouraging you to think. You want to think. You want more information. You want encouragement. You want to be pushed. And that is something that is intrinsically hopeful. That's something that's intrinsically good for your nations and for Western civilization. To not be content with sitting around, eating junk food that tastes good and doing nothing but fill your mind with the filth of Hollywood. It's good that you want to do more, that you want to learn more, that you want to think more, that you want to think better. All of that's good. Volkolak says, I don't even agree with most of what Vox says, but at least he has a bit of substance. Well, I always tell people, I don't expect you to agree. I don't even expect you to understand. If you do happen to understand, if you do happen to agree, that's great. But I don't expect you to. And all I ask you to do is just give it a fair shake. Think it through. Don't assume that you can simply reject it out of hand. I learn stuff all the time. I was applying lessons today that I learned from reading Oman's History of the Peninsular War. The importance of establishing structures with the right people and personalities in the right places, and the way that just assigning the wrong person to the wrong role can have tremendous ramifications for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Just because you gave it to the job to your friend or your buddy rather than the person who was more psychologically suited for the role. Splitter Tray says, what is happening in France is God's punishment to the French for apostasy. I doubt that, honestly. They've been apostates since 1789. Jilly Bear says, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg is barely alive. I had the same lung surgery in my early 20s and was completely bedridden for at least 3 weeks afterwards. And I was nowhere near the advanced age of Ginsburg now. Yeah, there's people who are saying that they actually think that she's dead, and it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Someone's assigning Ben penance. Says they have to buy a Vox book. Actually, I've really appreciated how you guys have been, not only directly supporting the channel with the super chats and everything, but it's been really great to see how you guys have been supporting the new Arkhaven store. It has been 3 times more successful than we expected in the first month. and that's been great. Hano Hano says, "Hey Vox, after last night's stream, I went and did some digging on mutations, and you were right. Mutations are most of the time a loss of information, but not always." Okay, that's good to know. The thing is, that's what I thought, but I don't like to actually state a firm opinion unless I'm sure. It's kind of funny. I get accused a lot of, never admitting that I'm wrong, or never believing that I can be wrong, or, always talking as if I know what I'm talking about. And it was kind of funny because one of the Dread Ilk, who had been around, one of the, the original Dread Ilk, said, that's ridiculous. I don't know anyone who admits he's as wrong as readily as Vox does. It's just that you don't notice because, I don't hesitate to do it. If I'm wrong, I admit it immediately. And I don't tend to express an opinion unless I have all my ducks in a row and I'm ready to actually prove it. Like in this case, what Hano Hano is saying is what is the understanding that I had, but I had no ability at the time to, whip out a quote or anything. So I just said, well, this is what I think. And, fortunately that was, my memory is still functioning well. He also had a question. Do you think Trump will cave on gun control? No, I don't. I think that he might allow a little play around the edges, like with the bump stocks and stuff. In terms of actual gun control, I don't think there's any realistic probability of that. Zowie Bear asks, I honestly think we will see fighting and roaming power outages in the big cities. In the end, it will bring people back to what matters: family, friends, and community. I think that's absolutely true. Look up, we actually sell it on the Castelia Direct store, but look up a book called Ages of Discord by Peter Turkin. It's really, really useful for understanding that stuff. We don't publish it. It's just a book that I've read, that I've reviewed. I think I even did an interview with the author, possibly. And, he says that the political stress level, which is something that he and his team track, is at levels that haven't been seen since right before the Civil War. And so right now, all the United States is really waiting for is some kind of shock to the system that will cause those fault lines to start breaking apart. Ben Sum 911 just says $10. Thanks, but do you have a question or even something to say? Anaf Habib says, the Faustian bargain that atheistic Western man engaged in is reaching its end. Absolutely. What you have to understand is that they didn't intend for it to end like this. This is not what they envisioned. They thought that by abandoning Christianity, that man was going to become secular humanist. That was what was supposed to happen. This is actually their plan B, the whole replacing the people thing. That's plan B. Plan A was, we will just all become godless hedonists and mindlessly go along with what our masters would prefer, and we'll all live together in a shiny, sexy, secular utopia. That was the original vision. That's the vision of the people who called themselves Futurians. That's why you read about that stuff in a lot of the 50s era science fiction, 60s era science fiction. But it didn't work because man does not survive in a spiritual vacuum. And so they had to come up with something else. And that's why Jordan Peterson is being elevated right now, because they know they need some sort of pseudo-religion to provide man with the meaning. It's not an accident that Hillary Clinton, what did she write about? The politics of meaning. What was Jordan Peterson's first book? Maps of Meaning. 12 Rules for Life to help you find meaning. They're trying to fill the void that the Faustian bargain created. The second part of Anaf's question was, do you feel that when the crash comes, many of these godless degenerates can forego their obsession with materialism? I think people are beginning to do so. I mean, I was a agnostic, godless, I guess you'd have to say degenerate in some senses, myself. And now, this is the extent of my possessions, pretty much. I mean, I used to be all about the Armani suits, the Ungaro ties. I loved my Porsche. Now, my wife is telling me, you really desperately need to buy some new jeans because, either they're falling off you because you bought them before you lost weight, or, there are holes in them because you've had them since college, and it's okay. Life is great. I would much rather spend an hour engaging in this sort of intellectual discourse with you guys than, going out to some expensive restaurant and pretending to be impressed by the presentation of some expensive, overrated food. A lot of Ruth Bader Ginsburg Weekend with Ruth jokes. Let's see. Porsche, I pictured you in a Lambo during your jet setter days. No, I was I had a 944 turbo that I loved. It was great. Wonderful car. BG says, much respect for you, Vox. Thank you. Likewise. Have you been exposed to expanding, growing Earth theory? All the continents fit together like a perfect puzzle on a smaller sphere. Please check it out. I don't buy into that, except in the sense that I do remember reading about a physics model talking about how the problem of gravity, because gravity is not understood, just so you understand. Physics does not truly understand gravity, how it works, why it works, and so forth. And one of the old dread ilk, who sadly is no longer with us, he was into physics. He was like a redneck physicist. It was kind of funny. And he was really fascinated with the idea that the constant expansion of the universe could explain some of these issues with gravity. And so in that sense, if you're talking about the entire universe expanding, if you're talking about the expanding Earth in that context, it may be the same thing, in which case I'm familiar with it. I'm not aware of any idea that the Earth is expanding, whereas other objects are not. That doesn't make much sense to me, the latter. Duralex Sedlex said, go read the Warhammer 40K more on the Imperium of Man and the God Emperor's plan for humanity. That's what they actually thought was going to happen. I would have thought they would be more with Chaos and the Demons myself, but anyhow, Warhammer 40K is fun, but I was always more of a fantasy battles guy. As you can probably tell if you've read A Throne of Bones. Hey Vox, any recommendations for a 43-year-old white man who has long considered himself an agnostic, though I was raised in a Roman Catholic American family? Thanks for your efforts too, good sir. My recommendations are, try to find yourself a Christian community. That could be a church. That could be a Bible study. That could be just a group of friends who get around to to shoot the philosophical breeze, but happen to be Christian. The key thing, and then obviously, start reading the Bible, especially the New Testament, and, talk to God now and then. That's what I would recommend. Let's see. The expanding Earth theory fits with Vox's "the Earth is a tesseract" statement. Does it? I just say that because it annoys me when people are trying to drive the conversation, with the flat earthers and stuff. They always get really confused when you say it's not flat, it's a tesseract. And then they suddenly get this they seem to get this idea that whoa, wait a minute, this guy's even crazier than we are. So anyhow, it's amusing. Tune in, who chooses the unusual super chat amount of 1913. I'm guessing that has something to do with the establishment of the Federal Reserve. Hey Vox, do you subscribe to the Austrian School of Economics? If not, what school do you subscribe to? I did, very strongly. I have moved a bit away from it. I mean, just so you understand, I subscribe to it so strongly that in my book, The Return of the Great Depression, I actually submitted what I consider to be a improved core mechanism for the Austrian business cycle. If you look up that book, Return of the Great Depression, there's a whole chapter dealing specifically with Austrian School of Economics, comparing it to the other schools and explaining why I think it is a superior school of economics. That being said, the proper way to look at economics is actually political economics. And there, it's very clear that the Austrians got it wrong. They failed to understand the importance of the nation, and so they fell into the same trap as the classical economists with regards to things like free trade. They never realized that corporations are actually worse than government. They never really thought through the fact that corporations are government entities, government created entities. So, we could do literally weeks of streams on Austrian economics. And in fact, we should do some economic streams in the near future. But anyhow, good question. It's a subject I like to talk about. Daniel Paul says, do you ever go out and enjoy the Italian Easter processions? Oh, I've walked in several of them. I'm going to see them in Sicily this year, the walking statues. Catholics are cool. Yeah, there is something to the Catholic talent for display. No question. I have to say that it sometimes felt more than a little bit idolatrous to be walking in a parade behind this big image of Mary that men were carrying on like a throne. So I can see why the Protestants sometimes have their issues with the papists. But yeah, we actually saw a really cool one. Where were we? We were down around Rome. We were in Lazio, on a pretty little town on the lake. Some friends of ours came, and we all went and stayed in a villa together for a week, and it was fantastic. And it was really great, and we saw a really impressive Easter procession down there at the time. Erica HM says, how about hydroplate theory as opposed to tectonic plates? I'm not at all familiar with hydroplate theory, and I have to admit that I have spent literally no time whatsoever thinking about plate tectonics. So, Sigmund of Lux, we can hope. He says, Western civilization is rallying off the stream. I hope so. If there's one thing that you take away from these talks, it's that Western civilization is valuable and it's worth preserving. And anything that you do to help support it is good. Having children, teaching children, supporting that which is good and beautiful and true, and rejecting that which is ugly and bad and false. Let's see. Is it safer to get married in Italy? I don't know. I have no idea. Vox, approximately what percentage of your audience is Italian? Probably very small, probably 2%, something like that. I mean, there's definitely some. I am in contact with a number of them, and so, there's ci sono italiani qui. Let's see. Oh, there's some other conversations. Yeah, and that is true, actually. One reason is that there's not a lot of Italians who speak English. And so they're not likely to be following a stream like this. White Southern God says, I'm a white Alabama native who moved to LA in 2001, got red-pilled in 2015, moved to Orange County in 2016, felt it was safer versus LA. Still single and concerned about Cali's future. Would you suggest I relocate to Alabama? Yeah, I would. You're going to, when things get difficult, you want to be around your people. You want to be around people that you can trust. And ideally, you want to be in a place where there's less than an average amount of excitement and drama. Orange County is better than LA, but it's pretty damn close. My family is actually, dating way back, is actually from Orange County. Nobody's there now. They all left. But, California is a beautiful state and it has a lot to offer, but it's been invaded and occupied. And so, the Mexicans do definitely want at least the southern half of it back. And at some point in time, history tells us at some point in time, they're going to attempt to get it back. Let's see. And you've also got an invitation to Georgia. Somebody says, come to Georgia. We are good people. Barbear says, Vox, can you explain why you think Hermeticism is satanic? Also, are you educated on what the 7 Hermetic principles are from the Kybalion? I think that Hermeticism is satanic because it is a form of magic. I don't think it is direct Satanism. I think it's indirect Satanism. It's not of God. It is of, it's attempting to exert your will over the world. And so, that is intrinsically not of God. I'm not familiar with those 7 principles that I'm aware of. Vox, I told my brother tonight that since 1990, movies and sci-fi have mostly sucked. That's absolutely true. It's amazing how good the technology is and what little they do with it. Boingo Bear, signs of Antichrist. Will we see in our lifetime? I doubt it. I very much doubt it because Christians have been actively anticipating that for, roughly 2,000 years, and they've all been wrong. I doubt we'll be the first to actually see it. Baron von Metzgenstein says, regarding yesterday's stream, did you ever read Larry Oster's Reasons for Doubting Tens? And if so, what did you think? I vaguely remember reading them, but I don't remember what they are because it was a long time ago. And I'm probably confusing them with Fred Reed's. I don't think it was a I don't think it was any influence on my thinking. I also remember being somewhat amused by Noam Chomsky's doubts about it, but um, but that had no influence on my thinking either. I mean, I do read these things, but I try to reason for myself. Gene Dirtle says, Vox, why does Umberto Eco have a special appeal for you? From my limited reading of him, I see a great writer, but also just another atheist humanist. Well, first of all, he is a great writer, a truly great writer, and that's very rare. So that is one thing. Secondly, he's both a medievalist, which I love. He's steeped in Italian culture, which I also love. I spent a whole day with him after I interviewed him in 1997. He was kind enough to invite me to go to a monastery with him in St. John's, and he was like the best type of humanist, the original, the real humanist, not about secular humanism, but just about genuine humanity and decency. I mean, I was really impressed by what a wonderful teacher he was. When he interviewed someone, it was kind of funny. I interviewed him, and he could tell that I was intelligent enough to, be on at least a similar level with him. And he would come back at me hard. I would ask a question, and I remember him saying, I mean, it totally affected the way that I view writing now and how I write, because he said, do you think he is the villain? He is not the villain. He is the hero from his own perspective. I mean, he was literally yelling at me. It's hilarious. And then I was thinking, he was getting interviewed later in the day. We went with him to the college campus. He was being interviewed by some of the college students. And this girl took about 5 minutes to get a question out. She was so intellectually intimidated by him. And she asked what just seemed like an incredibly dumb question. I remember she said, in your books, there is a lot of darkness, like the imagery in Name of the Rose. But in your new book, which was Island of the Day Before, in your new book, everything is bright. And he's like waiting for the actual question. There's no actual question. And he suddenly realizes that that's it. That's all she's got. And, after getting yelled at, for asking what I felt were, much more intelligent and relevant and apropos questions, appropriate questions, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is he going to do to this poor girl? And he took her question and just riffed off it for 10 minutes and left the impression that she had asked him a brilliant question. And he made her look really good. And I remember Space Bunny, she had come with me. And we were sitting there watching kind of from the side because we weren't in the audience. We were kind of backstage. And she was sitting there and she said, wow, that man is a great teacher. And that's what I heard about him too from people who did study under him at I think it was the University of Bologna, that he was just a great teacher too. I mean, I love reading he's one of the few writers whose nonfiction I enjoy as much as his fiction. And I don't know if you notice, but I'm one of the few authors out there who writes as much nonfiction as fiction. It's probably because of the influence on me. So, I mean, I was disappointed, I will admit. I don't think that he performed very well in his debate with his friend the Cardinal. I read that and I was like, I expected better and more from him. But that's actually part of the limitations of being an atheist or agnostic. There's just this sort of spiritual blindness there that tends to render some areas of your intellectual application weaker than it might otherwise be. But I mean, I was so disappointed. I was actually going to be going to an event that he was going to be at, and I was going to have the chance to meet him for the third time. And unfortunately, he died a few months before the event was scheduled. And I mean, I was, he's one of the few intellectuals that I genuinely, personally mourned. The idea that just on the basis that he would not be giving us any more books, any more columns. I have an entire row of my bookshelf. In fact, you can't see it, but the row above that shelf is all Eco, Italian and English. I mean, I partly taught myself Italian by reading Eco in Italian, which any Italian reader will tell you is not easy. But anyhow, sorry. As you can tell, I'm a big fan, and so I have a tendency to go off on that topic a little bit. So let's see here. Well, I think we're already at an hour. My goodness. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, always be on the lookout for controlled opposition. Not everyone who pretends to be on your side is actually on your side. There were some other topics I was going to get to, but we'll save it for next time. Look forward to seeing you at the next Darkstream. And we will, let me just check in real quick on, two things I meant to mention. We've got 2 new audiobooks out. So you might want to, if you like Westerns, check the Archaven store for Brings the Lightning and for Rocky Mountain Retribution. The other thing you might want to do is iTunes now has the streams on podcast. So don't hesitate to pick them up if you feel like listening to this stuff again. So thanks again. Have a good evening. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.